Have you ever witnessed someone suddenly hear a truth that turned their entire life upside down? Of the slap echoed through the ballroom, and for a moment, the world froze. My glasses flew off my face and shattered into 1,000 pieces on the gleaming marble floor. All 140 guests watched me, but no one moved. My cheek burned, but the pain in my chest was much deeper than that. It all started with a small detail that no one paid attention to. The ordinariness of that day masked the storm that was coming. Sienna, my bride, no. She wasn't even my bride anymore. She'd just gotten married a few hours ago, had slapped me on her own wedding day. And why? I refused to give her my apartment. What does an old woman need all the space for? She shouted at me, shaking with anger in her white wedding dress. This is what you get for your selfishness. You're not wanted here anymore, Rosalind. The silence was stifling. I bent down, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I tried to pick up my broken glasses. Some of the guests turned their heads uneasy. Others began whispering. But no one, absolutely no one, came to my defense. No one cared about the poor, humiliated mother-in-law. My son, Blake, stood in statuesque silence. His eyes were fixed on the floor, as if I weren't there, as if I were invisible. Blake and I have a right to privacy, Sienna continued, adjusting her flawless wedding dress. Your apartment would be exactly what we need while we start our new life. A temporary solution until we find something better. A temporary solution. My home, the place where 40 years of memories live. I stood up slowly. All eyes were on me, each piercing my skin like daggers. Tears streamed down my cheeks. But something inside me had changed permanently. That slap wasn't just a physical blow. It was the final straw. For years, I'd kept a low profile. Modest, simple, quiet. I had secrets no one knew, not even my son. And now, as I left the wedding hall, memories of the past few months flooded back into my mind. Sienna first coming to my house 2 years ago. Her face fell when she saw my furniture, my old kitchen, my tiny living room. Seriously, Blake's mom lives here, she said, her voice loud enough for me to hear. From that day on, every visit became a silent torture. Rosalind, you should move to a smaller place, he had said at a family dinner 3 months ago. You can't afford a big apartment at your age. Besides, Blake and I are planning to have children soon. We'll need more space. Her fake smile wasn't fooling anyone except Blake. My son bobbed his head like a puppet every time Sienna spoke. The insults gradually escalated. First came comments about my clothes. Don't you have something more modern, Rosalind? Then about my car. That car is too old. It's dangerous. Then about my part-time job as a florist. Why are you still working at your age? You should rest. Each sentence was a small poison dagger, destroying my self-confidence piece by piece. My name is Rosalind Carter. I'm 65 years old and have always preferred simplicity over ostentation. I work 3 days a week at a small flower shop. I drive a 10-year-old car. I buy my clothes at discount stores. From the outside, especially to Sienna, I'm just a middle-class widow living on a fixed income. But I've carefully cultivated this image for years. It was a decision we made together while my husband, Robert, was alive. Robert wasn't the average office worker everyone thought he was. We'd built a tremendous fortune together, but we kept it secret to protect our family's privacy. And now I realized how prescient this decision had been. This story was hidden behind a coincidence. As I left the ballroom, the guests' whispers followed me. Poor woman. She looks so fragile. The bride is right. She can't live alone at her age. He should be in a nursing home. Each word was like acid poured on open wounds. With shaking hands, I fished my phone out of my bag. It was my old black bag, the one I'd been using for 5 years. Not because I couldn't afford a new one, but because I valued practicality. Something Sienna would never understand. I called a number I knew by heart. A number I hadn't used in a year. But now I knew I had to. Vincent, I'm Rosalind. You need to come to the ballroom right away. Yes, right now. Bring the documents you know. It's time they learn the truth. My voice was trembling, but I had a resolve inside me I hadn't felt in years. Are you sure, Mrs. Carter? Vincent asked in a concerned but professional tone. Once we do this, there will be no turning back. I took one last look around the ballroom. Sienna was laughing with her friends, probably talking about how she'd managed to keep her no-good mother-in-law in line. I thought. Blake was beside her, smiling weakly, not a hint of regret on her face. I'm absolutely sure, I said. Within 30 minutes, Vincent. No more than that. I hung up the phone and walked determinedly to my car. For the first time, I would drop the mask I'd worn for years. For the first time, they would know the real Rosalind Carter. And then that moment when reality crashed into their perfect fake world, they would understand the true meaning of regret. The parking lot was quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows between the cars. I sat in my old sedan and waited. In 30 minutes, their lives would be changed forever. In 30 minutes, they would realize they had made the biggest mistake of their lives, insulting the woman who had secretly helped them more than they could ever imagine. As I waited, memories of how we got to this point began to flood my mind. It all started exactly 2.5 years ago. Blake had come into my apartment building with that tight smile. The tight smile I'd known since I was a little boy. Mom, I want to introduce you to someone very special, he said. That moment was the first step that would determine the direction of everything. And there she was, Sienna, with her perfectly coiffed hair, her designer clothes, and that smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. From the very first moment, I knew something wasn't right. The way he looked around my apartment, assessing every corner with undisguised contempt, told me everything about his intentions. So comfortable, he murmured as he looked at my second-hand furniture and faded curtains. His tone suggested the opposite. Ethan, no. Blake didn't notice the disdain in her voice. The tone of a man blinded by love. That first dinner was a quiet disaster. Sienna barely touched a meal I'd prepared, claiming she was watching her weight. She was evasive when I asked about her family, but her questions about my finances were alarmingly curious. How do you manage on a widow's pension, Rosalind? It must be hard to get by on so little. The curiosity he concealed behind his fake concern bothered me. But as Sienna observed me, I observed her. Over the next few months, I began to notice patterns that alarmed me. Every time they visited my apartment, Sienna would comment on how dated everything was, how I deserved better in my golden years. But her eyes always focused on the truly important details. The building's central location, the panoramic view from my balcony, the spaciousness of the rooms. One day, while Blake was in the bathroom, I heard Sienna talking quietly on the phone in the kitchen. Yeah, Mom? My mother-in-law's apartment is in a super expensive area. If we can get her to move to a smaller place, we can stay there until we find our own place. She's so naive. She'll probably even thank us for helping. His words stabbed into my heart like a knife, but I kept my cool. That day, fate made visible the web it had woven silently. From that moment on, every interaction with Sienna became a carefully crafted performance. She played the anxious bride, I the vulnerable older woman in need of guidance. But inside, I was gathering information, observing her moves, understanding her true motivations. It was a game of chess and we both thought we were winning. The following months brought a gradual increase in manipulation attempts. First came the subtle overtures. Rosalind, I've seen magnificent apartments for people your age. All-inclusive services and no maintenance worries. Then more direct pressure. He can't live alone at his age. It's dangerous. What if you fall and no one notices for days? Every argument was designed to make me feel inadequate and helpless. Blake, my own son, began repeating the same phrases like a trained parrot. Mom, Sienna is right. Maybe you should consider moving somewhere more manageable. Seeing him slowly turning into that woman's puppet was more painful than any direct insult. The psychological campaign intensified after she announced her engagements. The visits became more frequent, but also more tense. Sienna began bringing in real estate, magazines and brochures for senior living communities. I'm exploring options for you, Rosalind. I want you to have the best quality of life possible, he'd say, spreading the materials out on my coffee table like a job interview. But I was also doing my own research. While out for an afternoon of wedding business, I decided to call an old friend who worked in real estate. Amelia, I need you to look into something, I said. There's a couple who are very interested in my apartment, and I'd like to know more about their real financial situation. What I learned chilled my blood. Sienna and Blake were drowning in debt. The wedding they were planning cost over 50,000 financed entirely by credit cards and personal loans. The apartment they were renting was facing eviction because they couldn't make the payments. The luxury cars they drove were financed with installments they couldn't even afford. Their lifestyle was a facade built on suffocating debt. Everything started to make sense. The rush to get married, the insistence that I move, the constant comments about my financial vulnerability. It wasn't love that united this couple. It was their desperate need to find a solution to their financial problems. And my apartment, located in one of the city's most exclusive areas, was their lifeline. The discovery was a slap in the face. My beloved son, the boy I'd raised with values of honesty and hard work, had taken the easy path of manipulation and deception. He'd allowed himself to be persuaded by an ambitious woman to view his own mother as a resource to be exploited. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, his advances became more aggressive. "Rosalind, you can't continue to be so selfish," Sienna had said 3 days before the ceremony. "Blake and I have sacrificed so much for this marriage. The least you could do is help us with housing." The words hidden in the silences were as important as the words spoken. His words no longer even wore a mask of false concern. They were a direct suitor, disguised as family favors. "Vincent, my financial advisor and the only man I'd completely trusted since Robert's death. Vincent, I need you to prepare some documents. I may soon need to reveal information I've kept secret for years." His voice immediately grew serious. "Mrs. Carter, are you sure this is the right time? Once this information becomes public, you can't take it back. It could have devastating consequences for family relationships." But I had already made up my mind. The family I had tried to protect with my silence had chosen to betray me. Vincent to arrive with the documents that would change everything. I knew the moment of truth had arrived. Another 25 minutes and Sienna, Blake, and all those guests who looked at me with pity would discover who Rosalind Carter really was. Another 25 minutes and their perfect world, built on lies and greed, would collapse like sandcastles. The night breeze rustled the leaves of the trees around the parking lot, creating dancing shadows under the lights. It was strangely poetic to think that on such a beautiful night, so many illusions could die forever. Vincent's car appeared. Its headlights illuminated the night sky, momentarily blinding me. He arrived on time as always, with documents that would change my life forever. From the Rosalind I was and closer to the woman I was meant to be. "Mrs. Carter," said Vincent, a legal briefcase under his arm, "are you absolutely sure about this? Once we get in there, we won't be able to undo what happened." I took one last look around the ballroom. My son and his new wife were celebrating their victory over that worthless old woman they probably still despised. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life, Vincent. It's time they got to know the real Rosalind Carter." Vincent opened his bag under the parking lot light and began showing off the documents he had prepared. With characteristic efficiency, he had arranged everything. "Mrs. Carter, here's Ethan in order to immediately cease all wire transfers made in Hugh's name," he said, pointing to the first sheet. "Also, here's the lease cancellation notice you secretly guaranteed. The landlord will receive this document tomorrow morning." The papers with shaking but determined hands. Each document represented a thread I had meticulously woven over the years to protect my son. And now I was cutting those threads, one by one. "What about the ballroom payment?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Doubt was beginning to take over everyone's mind. "Cancelled," Vincent confirmed. "Your guaranteed deposit will be withdrawn tonight. They will need to find an alternative form of payment by tomorrow." The enormity of what I was about to do hit me like a cold wave. For 3 years, I had been the invisible safety net that had kept Blake and Sienna's lives afloat. The apartment they lived in, the car they drove, even the wedding that was happening right now, all made possible by my secret financial support. And now, in a single night, I was definitively withdrawing all that support. "Vincent, I want you to understand something," I told him, signing each document with a resolve I hadn't felt in years. "This isn't cruelty or revenge. It's the only way they'll learn the true value of things. For too long, I've shielded them from the consequences of their actions, and that shielding has turned them into people I don't recognize. I understand perfectly, Mrs. Carter, Vincent replied, genuine respect in his voice. In my 30-year career as a financial advisor, I have seen too many families destroyed by greed and ingratitude. What you did takes more courage than most people possess. His words gave me the final push I needed to take the final step. We walked together toward the ballroom entrance, and I could feel my heart beating faster with every step. It wasn't nervousness I felt. It was a strange mixture of sadness for what I'd lost and anticipation for what I was about to regain: my dignity, my self-respect, my right to be treated like a human being instead of exploited as a resource. The music stopped abruptly as we entered the ballroom. 140 pairs of eyes turned to us, and I saw confusion on the guests' faces. Some recognized Vincent immediately. After all, he had managed the finances of many of the city's leading families for decades. His presence at social events usually meant something important was about to happen. Sienna was the first to react. "What are you doing here, Rosalind?" she shouted from the middle of the dance floor, where she was posing for a photo with Blake. "You've already been out once. Hasn't there been enough drama for one night?" There was that arrogance in his voice that I knew so well, but I also detected a note of nervousness that hadn't been there before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vincent said in a clear, professional voice, "I apologize for interrupting this celebration, but Mr. Blake Carter and Miss Sienna, I have urgent legal matters to discuss with Vaughn." The silence that followed was so profound you could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Some guests began to pull out their phones, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Blake approached slowly, his face pale and his eyes full of confusion. "What's going on here, Mom?" he asked me, his voice less confident than it had been moments before when he'd insulted me. "Who is this guy? And why is he talking about legal matters?" I could see his hands shaking slightly as he adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture from his childhood. "Blake," I said, my voice firmer than it had been in months, "this is Vincent Reynolds, my financial and legal advisor. He's here to deliver some documents that I think you'll find very informative." Vincent opened his briefcase and pulled out the first document. "Mr. Blake Carter, you are hereby notified that your mother's financial guarantee for your lease is hereby revoked immediately. Your landlord will be notified tomorrow morning, and you will have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate the property." Blake's face. "Financial guarantee," he muttered, looking at me with eyes that were beginning to fill with comprehension and terror. "Mom, what is he talking about?" But I could see from his expression that a part of him already knew. He'd suspected for years that his financial luck wasn't entirely natural, but he'd chosen not to ask questions because the answers might be uncomfortable. "Furthermore," Vincent continued grimly, "your mother's monthly transfers of $4,500 to your personal accounts have been permanently halted. This includes credit card payments, car insurance, and various other expenses you believe were covered by other sources." Sienna's breath caught, echoing throughout the ballroom. "This is impossible," she cried, running toward us, her wedding dress dragging on the floor. "Blake doesn't have a rich mother. Look at how she lives. Look at her clothes, her car. She's an old woman living on a miserable pension." As time went by, the burden on his heart grew heavier. Her hysteria was obvious, and several guests began to murmur among themselves with growing fascination. Finally, Vincent said, pulling the last document from his bag, "The guaranteed payment for the celebration is also cancelled. The ballroom management reserves the right to demand full payment tonight before the guests leave." His words hit the ballroom like a bombshell, and I could see some of the guests begin to move nervously towards the exits. Realization hit Blake like a hammer. "You," he murmured, looking at me with eyes that couldn't quite process what he was hearing. "This whole time, you were paying for everything?" His voice broke on the last word, and for a moment, I saw the little boy he had once been, vulnerable and confused. 3 years, Blake," I agreed, my voice strangely composed after the emotional storm. 3 years of believing you were going through a rough patch. 3 years of believing you would finally bounce back and become the man I raised you to be. 3 years of hoping you would remember the values I taught me." Sienna began to circle, clutching her head in increasing desperation. "This can't be happening. This can't be happening," she shouted as the guests watched in a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. "You're a poor old woman. You work in a flower shop. You drive a 10-year-old car. You can't have money. Everything that was said brought back to the surface emotions that had been suppressed for years. Appearances can be deceiving, Sienna, I said finally, sensing the end of decades of careful performance. For years, I chose to live simply because my husband, Robert, and I believed that apparent wealth brought problems. We were right. Only the problems came from where we least expected them. The music had stopped completely, and the only sounds in the ballroom were the newlyweds, quickened breathing and the growing murmurs of the guests, realizing they had witnessed something unexpected. Some were already recording on their phones, instinctively knowing this story would become urban legend. Blake said, her voice breaking, "Please, there has to be a way to fix this. The wedding, the guests, everything." But I could see in his eyes that he was finally beginning to grasp the enormity of what he had lost. Not just money or financial support. He had lost his mother, the woman who had loved him unconditionally for 35 years. "The only way to fix this, Blake," I replied, "was to not break it in the first place." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. The 140 guests held their breaths, trying to process what they had just heard. Sienna stood still for the first time that night, her eyes flickering between Vincent, the documents, and my face, as if trying to find a crack in the reality collapsing around her. Blake just stared at me, with an expression I'll never forget, a mixture of shock, belated agreement, and utter terror. "Mrs. Carter," Vincent said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "would you like me to continue reading the full financial details?" His question hung like a sword over the newlyweds' heads. I could see several guests moving closer, captivated by the drama unfolding before their eyes. "Please, Vincent," I said with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. "I think everyone deserves the full truth." Sienna tried to intervene with a desperate cry, but Vincent raised one hand and continued with the precision of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. "Over the last 36 months, Vincent began consulting his documents. Mrs. Rosalind Carter has transferred a total of $162,000 to cover living expenses for her son, Blake Carter, and his fiancée. This includes $48,000 in rent payments, $44,000 in credit card payments, $18,000 in vehicle insurance, and $22,000 in miscellaneous expenses." A collective murmur swept through the ballroom. Some guests exchanged looks of surprise. Others pulled out calculators on their phones to verify the numbers. At the head table, Sienna's mother, the woman who had been sitting there throughout the entire confrontation, slowly rose to her feet, her face completely pale. Moreover, Vincent continued grimly, "Mrs. Carter personally guaranteed the total cost of this celebration, including ballroom, catering, music, flowers, and photography, in the amount of $53,000. As I mentioned, money no longer exists to cover these expenses." The uncertainty on their faces made it seem like something wasn't right. Sienna finally found her voice, but what came out was more of a groan than coherent words. "This is impossible. It's a lie. No one can have that much money and live like a pauper." He turned to the guests as if seeking support, but found only fascinated faces, some clearly amused by his helplessness. "Dear Sienna," I said with a calmness that contrasted dramatically with her hysteria, "you've learned a valuable lesson about judging people by their appearance. For years, I chose to live simply because my husband, Robert, and I valued privacy over ostentation. It turned out to be a very wise decision." Blake finally reacted, hesitantly approaching me. "Mom, please. There has to be an explanation. There has to be a way to solve this. You can't destroy my life like this." Her voice broke on the last word, and for a moment I felt a pang of maternal pain that almost made me hesitate. "Destroy your life?" I repeated, feeling the anger seething inside me again. "Am I destroying your life? Wasn't it your wife who slapped me in front of 140 people? Weren't you the one who stood silently while I was being humiliated? Weren't you the one who planned to evict me from my house?" The truth of my words echoed through the ballroom like church bells. Several guests nodded, clearly remembering the scene that had set off this whole drama. Some even had videos on their phones of Sienna slapping me, digital proof of the cruelty that had driven me to this revelation. Blake murmured, her voice lacking conviction, "We didn't know. We didn't understand. We thought you really needed help." His excuses sounded pathetic even to him, and I could see some of the guests exchanging glances of disdain. "Didn't you know?" I asked, my voice rising for the first time all night. "Didn't you know you planned a family ambush to force me to sell my house? Didn't you know you brought in a real estate appraisal without my knowledge? Didn't you know you were exploring legal avenues to declare me incompetent if I didn't cooperate?" With each question, Blake's stance became smaller. Vincent took advantage of the moment to pull another document from his briefcase. "Mr. Carter, I must also inform you that your mother has decided to change her will. All assets previously inherited by you have been directed to charities dedicated to protecting the elderly from domestic abuse." The impact of the revelation was like a silent explosion. Sienna staggered as if struck by physical force. "You can't do this," she cried, her mask of composure slipping completely. "We're your family. Blake is your only son. You can't disinherit him over some stupid fight." "A stupid fight?" I repeated, letting the words hang in the tension-filled air. "Is that how you define a family conspiracy to evict an old woman? Is that how you justify slapping your husband's mother on your own wedding day?" My voice had turned glacial, and I could see some of the guests flinch. Sienna's father, who had remained silent throughout the entire conflict, finally approached with a look of poorly concealed panic. "Mrs. Carter, I think we're all a little upset with the emotions of the day. Perhaps we can talk about this privately when things have calmed down a bit." His tone was that of a man who had just realized he had invested in the wrong horse. "There is nothing to discuss in private," I retorted. "Everything I had to say was said in front of the same people who witnessed my humiliation. You chose to make it public, so my response will be public as well." The guests' heads moved among us as if they were watching a tennis match, absorbed in every exchange. Vincent closed his briefcase with a dry crack that echoed throughout the ballroom. "Mrs. Carter, all documents have been submitted and declared. Legal effects will begin immediately." Blake and Sienna with a professional, but not particularly pleased expression. "I suggest you contact your own legal and financial advisors as soon as possible." As the minutes passed, everyone's gazes became more meaningful. Sienna finally collapsed. She literally fell onto a nearby chair and began to sob uncontrollably, sobbing that echoed throughout the ballroom. "Everything is ruined," she muttered through her tears. "Everything we planned, everything we worked for, it's all gone." Her once flawless wedding dress was now wrinkled and stained with tears. "No," I said, approaching him for the first time since the slap. "What's gone is the lies, the greed, the disrespect. What's gone is the illusion that you can treat people like objects and expect there to be no consequences." I stood in front of her, forcing her to look up. "This is what happens when you view people as if they were objects. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Blake walked over to his wife and placed a shaking hand on her shoulder. "Sienna, we have to find a way to fix this. There has to be something we can do." But even as he spoke, I could see in his eyes that he knew it was too late. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. "There is a way to fix this, Blake," I said, looking him straight in the eyes without feeling any pain for months. "You can learn from this. You can grow from this. You can become the people I hoped to be before greed corrupted you." My voice softened slightly because, after all, he was still my son. "But this growing up has to happen without my financial help, without my apartment, and without my inheritance. You have to do it the hard way, like everyone else." The ballroom remained in absolute silence, every person present knowing they were witnessing the definitive end of a family affair. Vincent and I headed for the exit, leaving behind a ballroom full of shocked guests and a newlywed couple whose perfect world had collapsed. In less than 30 minutes, as Vincent and I walked towards the exit, the silence behind me was broken by an unexpected sound. "Wait, Rosalind." Blake's cousin, Natalie. She had been sitting at a table in the back throughout the entire shootout. She ran toward us with tears in her eyes and a look of utter terror on her face. "Aunt Rosalind," he said in a trembling voice, "I knew nothing of this. I swear Blake never told me what he was planning with you." Natalie had always been my favorite niece. She was 27, a schoolteacher, and had maintained a close relationship with me even after Blake had pushed her away. "I know you know, Natalie," I said softly, placing my hand on her cheek. You were always different. You never saw people as opportunities or resources to be exploited." Her tears flowed faster, clearly devastated by her brother's actions. "But why didn't you tell us anything about the money?" Natalie asked with genuine confusion. "Why did you keep all this a secret for years?" It was a question that deserved an honest answer, especially coming from someone who had always treated me with respect and genuine love. "Because your Uncle Robert and I learned a long time ago that money changes people," I explained, as some guests snuck up on us and listened. "We saw families destroyed by inheritances, friendships destroyed by loans, children who saw their parents as walking pensions. We decided to live simply to preserve the relationships that really mattered." Natalie nodded slowly, beginning to understand the wisdom behind my decisions. Details that once seemed insignificant now carried great meaning. "But Blake used to be different. When you were a kid, you'd defend anyone who hurt you. What happened to that?" Her question contained all the pain of a sister who had watched her brother become someone she couldn't recognize. "What happened to her was Sienna," I replied sadly but without bitterness. "What happened to her was greed disguised as love, ambition without values. And in my effort to protect her, I robbed her of the chance to learn important lessons about responsibility and consequences." My answer echoed through the ballroom, the guests still hanging on every word. Carlos had respectfully stood aside during this exchange, but now he came closer and whispered something in my ear. "Mrs. Carter, the ballroom manager is approaching. Apparently he's heard about the cancellation of the guaranteed payment." Indeed, I could see a large man in a suit walking towards us with a few papers in his hand and a very serious expression. "Mrs. Carter," the manager said in a tense voice, "I just received a highly irregular payment cancellation notice. The contract for this celebration was guaranteed until tomorrow morning. Can you explain what's going on here?" His presence added a new layer of immediate reality to the crisis I had triggered. "Mr. Martinez," I said, remembering his name from our conversations when I secretly arranged a wedding payment. "Due to extraordinary circumstances that arose tonight, my financial guarantee for this celebration has been rescinded." I gestured with my hands to Blake and Sienna, who were still standing in the middle of the ballroom like statues of despair. "I understand," Martinez said, gazing at the stage with the experience of someone who has handled social events for decades, and now who will be responsible for the payment. "The total outstanding amount is 53,000, which includes ballroom, catering, music, flowers, and photography." His voice was professional but firm, making it clear that someone needed to fix this problem immediately. Blake finally reacted, taking hesitant steps toward us. "Mr. Martinez, there must be a misunderstanding. My mother can't just cancel the payment. We're family. This can be resolved." There was a desperation in his voice I'd never heard before. The desperation of a man finally grasping the enormity of his situation. "Young man," Martinez said with forced patience, "the financial guarantee was provided personally and specifically by Mrs. Carter. She has the legal right to withdraw it at any time. I now need someone to provide an alternative form of payment immediately, or I will be forced to suspend the event." As the words became harsher, an invisible wall rose in the environment. Sienna approached, staggering, her wedding dress now a complete mess and her makeup streaked with tears. "You can't do this," she shouted at Martinez. "This is our wedding day. You can't ruin our wedding day over money problems." Her hysteria was obvious, and several guests began to murmur among themselves with growing irritation. Martinez replied with increasing severity, "I am not spoiling anything. I am simply following the terms of the contract you signed. If you cannot provide alternative payment immediately, I will be forced to request the departure of all guests and suspend all services." His final verdict fell upon the ballroom like a final judgment. The reality of the situation began to sink in. Some had already grabbed their bags and begun to sneak toward the exits. Others were captivated by the unfolding drama, like bystanders at a traffic accident who couldn't help but stare. "Mom," Blake said, approaching me with tears in her eyes for the first time since she was a child. "Please, I know what we did was wrong. I know we hurt you. But there are 140 people here. There are photos. There are memories. You can't destroy all that over one fight." The looks they exchanged showed that what was happening was much deeper. His voice broke on the last word, and for a moment, I saw the little boy he once was. Blake, I replied with a calmness that surprised me. I am not destroying anything. You destroyed it when you chose greed over love, when you chose manipulation over honesty, when you chose to publicly humiliate me instead of treating me with the respect I deserve as your mother. Each word was like a dagger, but they were words that had to be said. Sienna asked in a desperate voice, looking at the guests as they continued to leave the ballroom. How do we explain this? How do we pay for all this? His panic was obvious, and I could see that he was finally beginning to understand the true consequences of his actions. You'll do what all responsible people do, I said. You'll find ways to earn an honest living. You'll learn to live within your means. You'll discover what it means to work hard for the things you want, instead of waiting for others to provide them for you. My voice had grown stronger, and I could feel the accumulated years of wisdom flowing through my words. Vincent snuck up on her and whispered, Mrs. Carter, the legal process is complete. All documents have been submitted and explained. There's nothing more we can do here. His message was clear. It was time to leave, to allow Blake and Sienna to face the consequences of their decisions. Without my distracting presence, Natalie stepped closer once more and hugged me tightly. Aunt Rosalind, I want you to know that no matter what happens with Blake, I will always have your respect and love. His words were like balm to my wounded heart, a reminder that not all families were corrupted by greed. And you will always have mine, Natalie, I said, returning the hug. Remember tonight when you make important decisions in your life. Remember that your character is not defined by what you have, but by how you treat the people you love. Tears wet my shoulder as she nodded, her eyes fully understanding the lesson unfolding before her. Martinez approached again, this time with greater urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, I need a solution immediately. I have other commitments tonight and I can't keep the staff here indefinitely without a guarantee of payment. His professional patience was finally wearing thin, adding additional pressure to an already hopeless situation. You have my phone number, I said to Blake and Sienna one last time. When you're ready to have a real conversation about respect and values and responsibility, when you've learned what it means to earn something for yourself, when you can look me in the eye and offer a genuine apology for what you did to me tonight, then we can talk. But for that, I added, looking directly at them, you're going to have to first find a way to sort out the mess you've created here yourself. With those words, I turned and walked toward the exit with Carlos, leaving behind a ballroom filled with chaos, despair, and the harsh reality of deserved consequences. 2 years later, as I write these lines, 2 years after the wedding, 2 years after that night that divided my life into a before and after, I sit on the same balcony where I water my plants and think about the humiliations I thought I had to endure in silence. How different the world looks when you finally find the courage to value your dignity. The morning began as it always has for the last 18 months with a call from Carmen, the coordinator of the Foundation for the Protection of the Aged. Yes, I've decided to use my own name for the charity I've founded with part of my directed inheritance. Rosalind, we have 23 new cases this week. Carmen informed me with the mixture of sadness and determination that characterizes those who work in this field. They're all similar patterns. Adult children oppressing their elderly parents for property or money. Every case that comes across my desk is like holding a mirror up to the past. Yesterday, I reviewed the case of a 72-year-old woman. Her daughter convinced her to sell her house for her own good, only to discover the money was financing a failing business and a vacation in Europe. The other day, it was a 69-year-old man. His twins were emotionally blackmailing him. If you don't loan us $50,000, you'll never see your grandchildren. A heavy silence hung over the room. The irony doesn't escape me. I transformed my worst personal experience into my life's most meaningful purpose. The foundation has helped over 400 seniors regain control of their finances, possessions, and most importantly, their self-esteem. We have expert lawyers, social workers, psychologists, and a support system that I wish I had when I felt so alone and confused. Theodore is still my favorite neighbor, but now he's also vice president of the foundation. At 74, he's filled with renewed energy since giving lectures on how to spot family manipulation. Rosalind, he told me last week as we reviewed the cases, I never thought my golden years would include being a detective of dysfunctional families, but this is the best adventure I've ever had. Natalie moved in next door a year ago. After getting divorced from a marriage that had lasted only 8 months, she decided she needed to be around the bravest person she knew. Working as the foundation's education director gave her a purpose she never found in a traditional teaching career. Aunt Rosalind, he says to me often, you taught me that true family doesn't come from blood. It comes from those who choose to respect you unconditionally. Of my story has brought unexpected results. The book I co-wrote with an investigative journalist became a national bestseller. When Love Hurts, An Old Woman Fights Back has sold over 200,000 copies, and all royalties go directly to the foundation. The letters I receive from readers are living testimony that my experience echoes in thousands of homes, places where silence is the norm. Just when everything seemed to be calming down, a new development occurred. Vincent remains my financial advisor, but he is now also the foundation's chief accountant. His experience handling the legal aspects of my confrontation with Blake has been an invaluable asset in helping others in similar situations. Mrs. Carter, he told me during our monthly meeting, we have recovered more than $3 million in property and savings, illegally obtained by abusive family members. The question everyone asks me, the question that comes up in every interview and every deep conversation, is do I miss Blake? The answer is complex and painful. I miss the child he was, the young man who showed glimmers of kindness and honor. I miss the illusion of the family I thought we had. But I don't miss the last few years of manipulation, emotional blackmail, and systematic disrespect. Blake tried to contact me exactly 3 times during those 2 years. The first time was 6 months after the television interview, when apparently some of his colleagues had seen the program and started treating him differently. The second was 14 months ago, when his son, my grandson Oliver, was born. The third was 3 months ago when Sienna left him, taking the baby and half of his modest estate. Each time he called, it was to ask for financial help, never to offer a genuine apology or acknowledge the harm he had done. His thought pattern remained the same. He saw his problems as external injustices, not as the consequences of his decisions. The final conversation lasted less than 5 minutes and ended when he said, "Mom, is your pride more important than your grandchild?" I replied with a clarity that surprised me. "Blake, my honor is exactly as important as my grandson's, and I hope one day he learns that lesson better than you." It was the first time I'd ever hung up the phone with my son, and it was also strangely liberating. Oliver, my grandson, is still the only subject that can make me cry. He's 14 months old and doesn't know me. When Sienna left, she took all the family photos, including the few I have of him. Oliver's college education, managed by Vincent, which will be available when he turns 18. Regardless of the relationship we have until then. Perhaps, Amelia tells me during our weekly dinners, when Oliver grows up, he will seek his own answers about what happened in his family. Maybe he will find the courage to get to know his grandmother for himself. Everyone was fighting their own silent battle. Amelia has become my closest confidant, especially since she herself had to set difficult boundaries with toxic family members a decade ago. What has surprised me most about these 2 years is how much my physical and mental health has improved. In the last few years with Blake and Sienna, I had developed chronic insomnia, constant headaches, and anxiety that kept me on edge. My doctor says my current tests show stress levels of a woman 10 years younger. Rosalind, Dr. Hernandez said at my last checkup, "It's impressive how the body responds when we remove toxic stressors. Blood pressure is excellent. Sleep is restful. Even your posture has improved." He's right. I walk straighter. My voice is firmer, and my hands no longer shake when making important decisions. The florist I worked at closed a year ago, but I've found a new passion in the community garden I helped establish in the building. I teach other elderly residents about medicinal plants and organic growing techniques. It's an activity that connects me to the land and to people who appreciate accumulated wisdom rather than viewing it as obsolete. My current routine involves 3 days a week at the foundation offices, 2 days visiting homes of elderly people needing emotional support, and devoting weekends to writing my second book. This book will focus on practical strategies for detecting and preventing family financial abuse based on the cases we have handled. The apartment, once a source of greed, is now a space of peace and creativity. I've transformed Blake's old room into an office where I welcome people who need guidance. The walls are covered with thank you letters, photos of families we've helped reconcile in healthy ways, and diplomas from the universities where I've lectured, a mentor to other older women facing similar situations. Margaret, 74, came to the foundation 6 months ago after her son sold his car without her knowledge to pay off gambling debts. We worked together for 3 months, and last week, she sent me a photo of herself smiling in her new car, a car she bought with her own savings after legally recovering the money. Rosalind, Margaret wrote in her letter, "You taught me that setting boundaries is not cruelty, but survival. You taught me that self-love is not selfishness, but a necessity. You taught me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself." His words reminded me why all this pain was worth it. There was an untold pain in each of their stories. As I reflect on these 2 years, I realize my story doesn't have the traditional happy ending where the entire family reconciles and lives happily ever after, but it has something better. It has authenticity, restored dignity, and a purpose that transcends my personal pain. I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is to walk away from those who insist on hurting you. To Rosalind, who walked into that wedding ballroom 2 years ago, I would say, be brave. What you are about to experience will be painful, but on the other side awaits a life more authentic than you could ever have imagined. The peace that comes from knowing that you will never again be treated by people who are unworthy of you awaits you. As I finish writing these thoughts tonight, I look to the future with renewed hope. Tomorrow, I have a meeting with senators to discuss new laws to better protect elders from domestic abuse. Next week, I'm opening the Foundation's 3rd Regional Center. Next month, I'm starting a documentary series on this topic that will air nationally. My life at 70 is richer, more meaningful, and more authentic than it was at 68. I learned that the end of a toxic relationship isn't a loss, it's a liberation. I discovered that true family is chosen as much as it is inherited, and I've proven that it's never too late to write a new chapter in your own story. When people ask me if I regret what I did that night, my answer is always the same. No, because I finally became the woman I was meant to be, and in the end, everyone got the answer they deserved. These events left a deep mark on their lives. The story ended there, but its impact lasted a long time. Every ending also opens the door to a new beginning. Some lost, some won, but everyone changed. Did you like my story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to leave a like. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I look forward to your comments about the story. There's much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next live story with love and respect.